just noticing in my body, where am I, what's coming up in me as I'm in session. Sometimes just like, let me just be here. And that's enough. We're offering this safe space. We're facilitating this. So just being part of that container and just remembering that we don't have to have all the answers for every single thing.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, joined today by Chris McDonald. Chris is a holistic therapist, yogi, meditation teacher, and author. She owns a group online practice called Path to Hope Counseling. She is a 200-hour RYT, is certified in brain spotting, and offers gentle yoga to clients in session, and offers private yoga sessions. She specializes in treatment of anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief in young adults. To support her fellow therapists, she offers clinical consultation and supervision, therapy for therapists, and is the author of Self-Care for the Counselor. She has helped many therapists prioritize their own mental health and wellness. She is the host of the Holistic Counseling Podcast, which helps therapists deepen their knowledge of holistic modalities and build their practice with confidence. Today, we're going to talk about how to manage mistakes in private practice and how to disconnect from work and reconnect to your personal self. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've rescheduled this a couple times.
It's okay.
It's finally happening, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Life happens.
It does. Absolutely. Yes. I'm so excited that one of the topics today is to talk about when therapists make mistakes, because that's one of the things that most of us were never taught to handle unless we have really great supervision, and it never gets normalized in our field. And people experience so much shame and embarrassment when they've made a mistake that they oftentimes don't even want to reach out to colleagues to get some support or some guidance.
I'm feeling that profoundly with the recent mistakes that I've made. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I can feel it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we all are going to make mistakes. And, the longer you're doing this work, the easier it is to reflect and figure out what you need to do. Whether you need to consult with someone else, whether you need to do some journaling, self-reflection. But I've never experienced a mistake with a client that I couldn't recover from in some way.
No, I hear you. There's usually some way to kind of repair and figure out how to best approach that with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that come up a lot when you're doing supervision?
It does. That's something I talk to supervisees about. And, a lot of times they can be in that panic mode and text me or, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Or I'm not sure if this was the right thing to say. Because I think often we get into that over-analyzing mistakes too.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And rethinking. And then when they say it out loud, sometimes they're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't as bad as I made it out to be.
Yeah. And I've even had some experiences where at the end of a session, after it's over, I'm thinking, oh, I should have said this, or, I should have responded a different way. And the funny thing is, on more than one occasion, when I've had one of those sessions that just kind of stuck in my mind and I'm really kind of giving myself a hard time, the next session, the client's like, the last session was really good. And that brought a lot of insight to me, like the second time that happened.
And that's something I talk to supervisees about. It's so funny because our perception is not always their perception of what is happening. Or I think a session was just like, I blew it. Everything I say is a reflection. They're like, no, that's not right. Or no, I'm not feeling. I'm like, oh man, I am off my game. Yeah.
Right?
And the funny part, I had a client recently say, I've had her for a while, and I thought, yeah, we usually are right on the same page. We do well. She's somebody I can laugh with. We are able to work on things, but also have that nice connection. So one time she goes, oh, well, there are some sessions that I really didn't get much out of. I was like, what? Are you serious? Then I'm thinking, yes. What were those sessions? I wonder what happened, because they were in the past.
So you're all in your head.
I didn't think that we really need to go back there, but I was like, okay.
Nothing like planting that seed of doubt and insecurity for you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. I had an experience once of walking someone. I was with a group in-person practice at the time, and walking someone out to the front lobby. And as we're getting to the lobby full of people, she's like, did we even accomplish anything tonight?
Oh, no. And you're like,
it's bad. You said that, but you sit in front of like all the other clients.
So you're feeling you didn't accomplish anything as a reflection. I think this is just so common. It's such a universal experience for all of us, because we are human. We are going to make mistakes. Yes. And sometimes we're off our game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, when you have built a rapport with clients, and it depends on the client, obviously, but sometimes they'll say, you just don't really seem like yourself today, or you're like, I use a lot of humor in my therapy.
Me too.
Yeah. And they'll be like, you just missed an opportunity there.
Oh, you're like, oh, wow. Okay. Put you in your place, right?
Oh. Okay. So are there more common mistakes that you see with newer therapists, or are there types of mistakes that you see more frequently with newer therapists?
I think a lot just trying to build their confidence that comes up frequently. And, I'm a holistic therapist, so I teach some holistic modalities. So I do teach some therapists how to use that as well when they're interested in. And a lot of them are just that hesitancy, right, with new modalities and practicing that. And like, I'm not sure, like, when do I do this? Like, did it go okay? I'm not sure. So it's just kind of over and over trying to get to that repetition so they can feel more confident. So I think that it can be really difficult sometimes with feeling, and sometimes I feel like they make mistakes or didn't do it well. But if I listen to an audio tape, I'm like, that was great. I was like, you're on it.
Right. Yeah. And I think an early mistake with a lot of therapists, I remember feeling this way anyway, was needing to like have a response or an answer or a reply immediately, and not allowing yourself to sort of fall into that natural cadence with clients, or even say, let me think about that for a minute, but not putting that pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And then many try to fill the space with, I got to say, so it's quiet. And so encouraging two things, the pacing. So that's what I noticed too, working with therapists. And okay, let's just see where you are. Sometimes just sitting back in your chair, just take a breath before you speak. And sometimes, the clients will kind of jump in there too, and allowing silence. Silence can be golden. It can be such a helpful opportunity for a session, because the other part of that is over talking. So I have some that over explain, like if they're to a modality, or it's just like they keep going. I'm like, are you hearing yourself as we listen back to these tapes? It's like,
Yeah. And the silence thing, I'm ADHD, so I struggled with that for a long time.
Yes.
And I
still struggle after many years.
Well, yeah. So my workaround is I will actually glance at the clock, because it's going to feel like 10 minutes to me when it's been like a minute. And so that way I'm like, okay, I'm going to gauge this a little bit so I can have an idea of how long this silence is lasting, because my brain doesn't track that very well.
Yes. No, I think just finding those strategies, kind of grounding in yourself, and just kind of noticing, because again, I'm holistic. So I go back to these strategies of just noticing in my body, where am I, what's coming up in me as I'm in session. Sometimes just like, let me just be here. And that's
Right.
enough. We're offering this safe space for facilitating
Mm-hmm.
this. So just being part of that container and just
Yeah.
remembering that we don't have to have all the answers for every single thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Something that I see with the groups that I facilitate, the more seasoned therapist, sometimes they get in too much of a hurry. And I know I've done that before, where we see the path that this client is on and we want them to, like, we know where they can be and we're feeling impatient. And sometimes that shows up as imposter syndrome. And I have, a more seasoned therapist in my groups that will say like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a terrible job with this case. And so we'll start talking about it. And we're like, no, it sounds like you're doing a good job, but I think you have some imposter syndrome going on here because, and I don't know if you've seen this with the people you've supervised or you also do consultation. Since the pandemic, everyone is so much more exhausted that I'm seeing so much more stagnation in clients, not just my own, but others, where clients are not making the rate of improvement or the progress that we're expecting because they're just trying to be okay right now. They're just trying to get through the day because I think the pandemic is still massively impacting us and people aren't really recognizing that. And so saying they're showing up every week, you're having a full session with them every week. You are clearly
Yes.
doing something. Right.
Yeah. And reminding ourselves, we all need those reminders too. And that's why I love what you offer too with the consultation, because it can be lonely in our heads as we process
Yes.
these sessions and difficult things come up. And I work from
Mm-hmm.
home and I know lots of others do too. So that's even other bigger bear. I
Yes.
don't have my
Yes.
colleague Janine down the hall to
Right.
talk to. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have to
Yep.
really be mindful of that too. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like we can really go into a bad place if we're thinking I'm not making progress with this client. And, what is your expectation? What is the client's expectation? And really seeing, are we being real with where we
Mm-hmm.
want to go? Because I had clients that convinced me they're not making progress. And then they say something, I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
That is progress, right? Because they think that
Yes.
they need to have these huge leaps and bounds, but
Right.
maybe in a moment, like I had a recent client that, is having some substance for coping and was able to do a distraction activity instead.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let's celebrate those. Oh my gosh, that's huge.
Yes. Yes. And I love it when clients will come to a session and they'll be like, so this week you just popped in my head and I was dealing with this situation and I thought, what would Janine say?
I said, I want to get you a bracelet. What would Chris say?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because that means they're getting it. They're
They
making
are.
progress. They're learning. Yeah.
And
And
that's
then, and even better still, when a family member will say, you need a session. When are you seeing Janine again?
exactly. But sometimes I cringe. I don't know if listeners do that when they say, oh, what I heard your voice and in my head, I'm like, oh gosh, what did I say? I remember when you said fill in the blank. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I don't remember I said it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm,
Right.
but they remember. And it was a
Yeah.
helpful thing. So I think just sometimes that can help build your and remember with imposter syndrome that you are making a difference. And I think
Absolutely.
I think another mistake people make is getting too caught up in the modalities.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things out there, but we got to go back to the basics, man. Sometimes just going back to the relationship and the
Yes.
presence, the space you are giving. What a gift if we really analyze and think about that. This may be the only time that they have to really be there for themselves and to
Mm-hmm.
have you to talk through issues with.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many things that we have to hold in our head when we're doing sessions too. And so sometimes we don't, intuitively with experience, you sort of know the things. But I've had situations where I had a group where there were newer, most of my groups have a combination of newer and seasoned clinicians. And, newer clinician might say, I wonder, you didn't spend enough time building rapport with this client,
Hmm,
And so like we all need those types of reminders. We all need those gentle, like, okay, you know what's
exactly.
happening, you got the path, but maybe they're not where you think they are.
So true. And I recently just did a consultation with someone this week, another colleague, and he and he kind of brought me back. He's like, well, I think you got to come back to the here and now. Cause I was getting caught up in the modality. It's so easy for us to be like, this is the only way, right? If I do brain spotting or do these other
Yes.
breath work, well, hang on a second. Let's just go back and have them be in the moment with that emotion
Mm-hmm.
or that thought, that's difficult thought, and
Right,
see
right.
what's there first and maybe dig a little deeper with that. Because we don't have to always have I guess, is there a right answer? That's the question. We're getting deeper now. But
Yeah.
just really just to be present is so
Mm-hmm.
impactful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a common mistake that people who've never been in therapy think that we have the answers, that they're going
Yes.
to come to us and we're going to say, do X, Y, and Z, and life will be glorious. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yes. Yeah. And helping them find the answers within and to learn how to
Mm-hmm.
heal themselves. And their
Right.
and this is what I've learned with brain spotting too, is their brain wants to heal. It can heal you, but it is
Mm-hmm.
tapping into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how to disconnect from work and reconnect with your personal self. So actually, before we do that, I
Yeah.
wanted to, there was one more thing that had come to mind that I wanted to not skip over. One of the things that I hear from supervisees is that if they're being supervised on the job, they're afraid to admit a mistake and ask for help because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. Have you ever had that experience of hearing people say that?
Yeah, I think that that's a different dynamic than if somebody's in private practice, and I think that that causes a lot of anxiety and those fearful
Mm-hmm.
things, and I've had to talk through some of that with supervisees in the past. That is really a challenging situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many difficult dynamics when you're learning and going through not just grad school, but getting your hours and then trying to get your supervised hours towards your license. It's a really hard time of life for a lot of people because you're through school, but you're making next to nothing and working a ton of hours and sometimes
Yes.
paying for supervision on top of that. It's a very difficult time for therapists.
It is, and it can be overwhelming it is developing that clinical judgment, and that's the imposter syndrome can be big, and just doubting yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
if you do make a mistake, then admitting that and going, I remember when I was in working at agency, it's tough. It's just was, even though I had some experience, it was still difficult.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the how to disconnect from work. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is something that I talk about in my book, Self Care for the Counselor, as well, because I find that it's easy for us to just the quick way, right? Oh, close my laptop if I'm doing telehealth, or shut the door from the client. Just time to go home. If I work away, now we have to look at both, right? Working from home or coming from an office, just leaving. But it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always leave our mind, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
mind isn't always able to catch up with our physical body moving out of the
Mm-hmm.
office space. So if you are able to, I always like to make it a mindful practice too, to tell myself that, okay, work is done today,
Mm-hmm.
and have some kind of intention. Like, I will leave work at the office. I will be present for myself and my family. So think about your values. What's important to you? Letting go of the task. For me, I can easily be like, oh, wait, I got to go send this email.
Mm-hmm.
Letting go of tasks and reminding yourself of the present moment. I am here, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm switching gears to let go of work. And even just using visualization, if you're a visual person, imagine putting it, I call it the shelf of putting it away, or a filing
Mm-hmm.
cabinet, but locking it up. So it's going to be here tomorrow. That was something
Right.
I've learned as well. Whatever you still need to get done, it will still be there when you start work tomorrow. Making that
Mm-hmm.
mental, emotional disconnect. Just
Mm-hmm.
taking a moment to close your eyes, connect with it, and take some breaths. Do something that's good for you to kind of release the day. I think can be
Mm-hmm.
so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this falls under the category of things we teach our clients that we need to do for
Isn't it?
ourselves, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. And putting
Yeah,
it into
I actually
practice.
right, right. I know. I actually sent an email out this week to a group of people that participate in my live fictionalized consultation groups. And I said, I've overscheduled myself, and old me would have just pushed through, but evolving me is going to do what I would tell a client to do. And I'm just going to cancel it for this month
There you
and
go.
move
Yes.
forward. And I got the kindest replies. People were just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah, I know you and I talked about that because I did that with you and overscheduled myself. And,
Right. Yeah.
and again, we're all works in progress. So I think going back
Yeah.
to that self-compassion, right? It's so important.
Yeah. And I agree about, so I went fully online in 2019. So I was already online when the pandemic happened. And so that was an adjustment in itself of, okay, now I'm working from home. I'm not leaving the office. I'm not driving home. So I had to figure out ways to make that mental shift when my workday was over. And then shortly after the pandemic started, a family member needed to use my office in our home. So I had to move my office into my bedroom, my husband and I's bedroom. And that was really hard because I felt like, I mean, I really would like go in there and try not even to look in that corner, because I'm like, the minute I look in that corner, that I'm right there back in work and I've got all those things on my mind. And so we have to be, like you said, really mindful about what kind of strategies can we put in place for different situations, so that we can, I like to use triggers with clients. I'll say, when I'm trying to get them to do breath work, every time you get in the car, take a minute and do your breath work, and so doing that with leaving work as well. What's going to be your trigger when you're leaving your office to say, okay, I'm done with the day?
Yeah. There's two. Yeah. If we're working from home, there might be different than getting in a car. Part of that is, what are you already doing? Like you said. So if you're opening the car door, being mindful when you're doing that, just keep focusing on the task that you're doing, sitting into the car, just noticing the steering wheel under your hands, just getting to those mindfulness kinds of strategies. And then what is a ritual? What is something you could do that signals to your brain it's the end of the day? For me, I love podcasts. So I put my little earbuds in and if I'm making dinner, whatever it is. Now it's to the point, if I don't do that, I feel like my brain's kind of like, wait, where's the podcast? Where's the time?
Right.
Yeah. So just tuning in for me is helpful. But sometimes I would also just listen to music, because music for me is very calming. I mean, you could also, if you have time, just go for a quick walk, or just going out in nature, standing outside for some breaths. Simple things that don't take a lot of time can be helpful.
Absolutely. And just slowing things down. Our world has gotten so fast paced and so busy, and really just paying attention to slowing down. And mindfulness is so huge. I mean, I teach that to all of my clients. Everyone needs that these days,
Yeah, it's such a helpful thing. But and again, and for therapists to put this into practice, I know that we teach this. So making sure we can try to do that for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
And thinking about intention, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was going to say, because you have other tips to share with us. So
I was going to say thinking of that as an intention, that this is something that I'm going to do. In yoga, we often use intentions, but so this can be something that you put in the front of your mind, that this is something that I'm attending to each week, that I'm going to make this important disconnection from work into my personal self. And for me, I think transitions overall are so important. Like, how do you start your day? What do you hop out of bed and just feet run and go, go, go? Or are you just being more mindful and taking your time to, like you said, not rush, and slowing down more? Because I have clients that do that too. They're just go, go, go all the time. And the more fast they're moving, the more their thoughts are moving fast. And it's just their emotions are going to also be fast, like more anxiety. If you're constantly thinking, moving, it's just not good for your physical or mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I will have clients or friends or family, that are saying, I feel like I have memory problems. Like, my memory is just not as good. And if, my first go-to is mindfulness. You got to slow it down. Your brain is tracking things too fast all the time. And so you're not giving your memory a chance to work. So you got to slow it down, and let's practice some mindfulness.
And not be doing multitasking, which doesn't work. It's not good for you. And how many tabs do you have open on your computer right now? That's for listeners to think about.
I was like, I'm not going to answer that.
Exactly.
We saw a meme that said they're emotional security tabs. I love that
I'm
because there
holding on
truly
to
are
'em.
some. Yeah, there are truly some that I have open that I'm like, I'm going to get to that one day. And it's reassuring to me that it's like still on my to-do list because the tab is open and I need to just shut it.
Shut it down, right? Yeah. And that physical act, if you're working from home, to close your computer, actually,
Yes.
to shut that down.
Mhm.
Turn, I don't know if you have an extra camera that you can just make sure that that's shut down. Everything is shut down and release. And I also do, from an energetic standpoint, do some clearing. So I might stand in mountain pose and I have some clearing sprays like Palo Santo or sage and just spray my room, releasing the energy from clients from the day and letting go. In my mind, I say I'm letting go of any energy that is not mine and imagine it go through my body into the earth, letting it
Mhm.
go. I think that's so
Mhm.
important for therapists too, the energy part, because if you don't release that, I mean, that can linger sometimes, especially some heavy stuff. If you're a trauma therapist, that can be
Yeah.
difficult. You got to put
Mhm.
in even more self-care for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really think that another way that therapists need to look at self-care is the number of clients we're seeing a week. When I was early with a group practice, I was doing 45-minute sessions. I was seeing 38 clients a week. On Mondays, I would see 12
Ooh,
clients back to back, no break. I would only have lunch if someone canceled. And I would come home like useless. Had
yeah.
nothing left for my family. I really just wanted to like go into a dark room and just sit in the corner, you know? And so looking at how many sessions in a row can we do before you need a break? How many during a day can you do? Because people think that we should do 40 hours a week. So we should be seeing 40 clients. But not only is that not realistic as far as the paperwork and documentation goes, but it's just not sustainable. We are so in tune to our clients when we're working with them. It's just not realistic to be able to, see 8 clients a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah, and some people do that. God bless them, because
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
And I think it's just being real of what is something that you can do realistically that you don't feel so. I call that being a zombie at the end of the day. Because if I see
Hmm.
um 6 or 7 clients, I mostly see 4 to 5, and that works for me.
Hmm.
And I know financially it's tough for some people too.
Yes.
And that's a consideration. Is there other ways I want to make some money? Because it's tough to do 8 or 9 a day. I just don't think that it's helpful for you. It's not healthy for the client either, because
Mm-mm.
they're going to sense your energy. Can you imagine being client
Absolutely.
12,
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
you probably weren't as present, but it's not your fault. It's just
Hmm.
that's too much. It's
Yeah. But
overwhelming.
client 12, when I decided to shorten my workday, was like, wait, are you?
Yes.
I'm glad you feel like it's been a great experience for you, but I cannot do this many sessions a day anymore.
No, no, that's taking care of yourself and how you set up your schedule. Like you said,
Hmm.
setting times for breaks and doing, and
Hmm.
I think scheduling can be the biggest self-care gift, and allowing time for lunch, allowing
Yes.
bathroom time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the other area that I see therapists struggling a lot is, how sick do I need to be to cancel a session? This comes up all of the time in my consultation groups. And we have the bar set so high for ourselves. And and I've even gotten to the point where I'll say to people, well, you don't have to cancel all of your clients. If you just feel really awful right now, cancel that first one and, give yourself a little bit of time and assess whether you're going to go through the rest of the day, or just cancel them all and be done with it, and take care of your body. And, we do have clients who are a little more emergent that's going to be really hard for, but we're going to do our best to get them in as soon as possible. Right. But it's not good for us or them if we're
Oh,
working ill.
yeah. And I used to do that too. Just got to push through. But
Hmm.
and it was so bad at one point, I actually had to leave a telehealth session and throw up in the bathroom so
Oh my
bad.
gosh.
That was
Yeah.
not my best moment. To me, that was a
Right.
mistake in private practice, going back to that, because I was like,
Yeah.
I can't
Mistake.
do,
Yeah.
I can't do this. I just pushed myself too much, and
Hmm.
it'll be okay. You'll figure this out if you have to
Yes.
cancel.
Absolutely. Yeah. But when we are in private practice, the income piece is always hanging over people's heads. And I think, again, some of that comes back to planning. You need to plan for vacation time, set some money aside for that, but also plan for cancellations, set money aside for that, plan for sickness, set some money aside for that. Because if you're only working to make the amount of money you need and it's based on working every single day, seeing the certain number of clients, then you're setting yourself up for stress and disaster.
Yeah, that's the rainy day fund too. It's just for whatever life happens, that you may miss sessions, because that is setting yourself up, I think, for failure with that. If you're going to struggle financially without seeing all the clients in a day and having that. Okay. So I think that gives a sense of security, like knowing, okay, I have this extra money. It's okay if I cancel today. Giving yourself permission. I've never had a client be like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Why did you cancel?
Right.
They're all like, are you okay? I hope you feel better. Yeah. Everybody's been supportive. So I think some are fearful, like, oh my, they're going to be upset with me. I don't know about you. But.
No, I haven't. No. And we were even talking in one of our groups about when unexpected things happen, illness or something else. And how do you notify clients? And I said, years ago, I learned that I have a set text that I will send individually to each client. But I learned that at the bottom of the text, I need to say, please reply so I know you got this.
That's
Otherwise, true. I'm waiting and thinking, like, is somebody at a session thinking I'm coming because they didn't see the text or for some reason it didn't go through?
That's a good point. Yeah. I didn't even think of that.
Well, there's so many little tips and tricks that you learn over time to just and I like to joke that every year I update my informed consent, and typically on any new policy that goes in there is because something happened I didn't anticipate. And now I have to put it in the informed consent to make sure everyone's on the same page about how we're going to handle this.
I'm glad you said that, because that was something when I thought about this episode, like that is one thing that has really created my informed consent to, I make a mistake. Oops. Well, let me make sure I have a proper form for that or a proper sentence in there to cover that, especially with insurance stuff, that if you accept insurance, there's always gonna be things you don't understand. And yeah,
absolutely. Well, this has been really wonderful, Chris. Do you have anything else you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
I think that we covered everything. I think just figuring out what works for you, because everybody's different as far as the disconnection. The only other thing I was going to say that helps me as well is just tidying up. So I like to have a clean desk and clear everything off my desk and not leave, wrappers or water bottles and papers. And I think to me that kind of is like a refreshing, like a feng shui thing. Just I want to have the energy clear in my room too. Something else to think about too. Being organized.
That's a
with
really
your
good
space.
point. Yeah, starting your day fresh with everything tidy and ready to go. My husband and I disagree because when we go on vacation, I like to clean the house before we leave. So I come home with like all that laundry to do, but the house is clean. And he's like, oh my gosh, we're trying to get packed. Why are you cleaning?
Well, you and I are too much alike.
I'm like, I'm going to be so happy when we come home that the house is clean.
Yes, for sure.
That's great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Sure.
Will you please tell the listeners where they can find out more about what you offer, how to connect with you, all those things?
Yeah. So you can check out my holisticcounselingpodcast.com. Lots of different topics on there about private practice, self-care, and holistic strategies. I also have a self-care boundaries for therapists course, which you can find that at hcptrainingseries.com.
Awesome. Great. And we'll put that information in the show notes. For everyone listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.